Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Arnie Lukes here at the Freedom Forum, and I'd like to welcome Yves Potvey. Good evening, Yves.
Good morning.
It
Good
is
evening to
morning your
you.
time. That's right. It's evening my time. What's the weather like in Canada?
Well, we've had a lot of rain last night. There was a
Hmm.
frost last Sunday, the first frost, and but the rain was really pouring down, thunderstorm, lightning here,
Hmm.
and it's supposed to continue today. So,
Hmm.
but it's going to get warm. It was warm yesterday and the day before. It was like
Hmm.
a humidex of 39 for the
Really?
last
Oh.
day. So you go from frost one
Hmm.
day to another. We call that climate change.
Yeah, that's right. I do note, Yves, that last week we spoke about the hurricane that was going along the east coast of America, and so that was actually the source of the rain that you received. Is that right?
It probably is on the outside. I cannot tell with they keep floating around with that jet stream, the
Hmm.
thing that goes up and down.
Hmm.
So you want somebody to get a storm, they just pull it down. I don't know, but it's some kind of so I was going along the east coast of the United States. It didn't
Hmm.
touch the United States too much,
Hmm.
but when it got to Canada,
Hmm.
it went right through the middle of Nova Scotia, which is in length, the same length, like it parallel with the storm,
Hmm.
and the damage was fairly significant. But fortunately, the category was down to one.
Oh, okay.
So so it was five in Bahamas,
Hmm.
and then four, then three in Florida, and then it went up the coast.
Hmm.
So some people are really the Bahamas. I really we should really pray for those people because there's 2,500 still missing.
Mm.
Uh, 50 people they know are dead.
Yeah.
2,500, we don't know where they went. Maybe they fled. I don't know. It's pretty hard to get away from the unless you take a boat or a plane or something like that.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's
Anyway,
really a
pretty
really
much some
tough
people are
time.
pretty bad. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Really tough time for those people in the Bahamas. And as we said last week, they're in our prayers, but they're also in our thoughts, and we present those to our audience. Okay. Today's subject is a continuation of what we were discussing last week, and that is the national dividend. And I wanted to cut across to a website here, and this is the taxpayer. It shows the debt clock in Canada at 694,000 million Canadian, and this other debt clock here, which is in Canadian dollars, 1.216 trillion. And so there may be a variance between this being perhaps in American dollars or no, but either way, the numbers are so astronomical. They're so astronomical, they're frightening. And your share of it, 18,000, 18,500. And of course, if you're a young person, just to have this sitting over the top of your head, it's quite intimidating. Now, debt to me is a consequence of the banking process, if you like, the financial system, and it's quite frustrating because I guess I consider that there is no reconciliation to the natural world within the existing banking system. There's no reconciliation, and that is that if a community wants to achieve a new project, build a bridge or a wharf or something like that, or dam up a river or something like that, it's the community that actually resources itself and goes out and executes the project. But it's the banks that issue new loans in order for the community to actually exercise it and then claims that new loan as its own property. And of course, the new loan is either mortgaged against the asset, or in the case of government, it's actually held over the head of government because they have the capacity to tax the community. And so it's a if you like, it's an almost impossible redemption of debt under the existing narrative of debt finance of modern banking, and it doesn't reconcile the fact that when the community goes and resources the raw materials, converts them into usable products, and then executes the project, it has actually achieved the task, and therefore the debt is physically paid. The debt is physically paid by the completion of the task, whether it's building a bridge, a wharf, or damming up a river, or any other project that the community decides to do. The debt is actually paid. And yet the financial system not only claims that it is issuing its own money, which it is not, it's issuing new money it creates out of nothing, claiming it as its own, and then of course also claiming that you will be on the never never paying an interest component for whatever it takes, 25, 50, 100 years, whatever they choose, whatever terms and conditions that they set. Now this is enormously powerful, enormously powerful. It's a power over and above governments, a power over and above communities. And the national dividend proposal is where that power is wrestled back. It's wrestled back from the tyrants in charge. It's no different than when power had to be wrestled back from King John with Magna Carta. Power had to be wrestled back. And so it is the same challenge for us today to wrestle that power back from the banks and place it firmly into the hands of the individual. That's the national dividend. Eve.
Yep, we we owe a lot of money, which we shouldn't owe. We've built this country. We build the wealth of this country. And for example, there is a GDP, and there's income that comes with that. So I always calculate it. I don't know the exact numbers, but I always calculate Canada, for example, to be $800 billion in GDP. And the salaries to manufacture all that is about 60%.
Mm-hmm.
These are just approximate number. I might be way off by being too low or something like that. But nevertheless, there is an amount between the 60% and the 100%, which I call profit. So the profits, we've been denied our profits. That should be put into a dividend, not in debt, but instead they've taken that dividend that we're supposed to get and they turned it into a debt. How they did that, it's a magnificent trick, the magician's trick.
Yeah.
And we have to always suffer for that. We have the poor here. We have a picture of a destitute person that's got no food, has got no home. And it says here, we say the poor are disinherited when in fact they are denied their inheritance.
That's right.
That's got to say a lot.
Yeah.
Are we going to get freedom? We will eventually. We will eventually. I don't know how soon. And people ask me, you're crazy. What are you going to do? You can't do nothing about it. The banks own you. They own everything. Yeah, but I would like people to know, and I would like people to fight along with me, or along the idea of social credit, so that we can bring about a dividend which will take the power out of some of the powers, a lot of the powers from the bankers.
Yeah, no, that's a valid assessment, Eve. Now, I want to point out to our audience that the national dividend proposal is not a tax-based source. It's not a tax-based source. It's not actually taking anything from anyone. What it's doing is, instead of issuing in the form of a debt purchasing power to people, it's issuing it in the form of credit. And at the same time as not taking from people through a form of tax or something like that, what it's actually doing is it's also maintaining the existing free enterprise system. And that is that if people have initiative, they're creative, they're innovative, they want to work over and above whatever, then there's no reason why they shouldn't receive their wages as they currently do, but also receive their inheritance, and that is the dividend. It reconciles power back to the individual. It ensures that the community can actually liquidate the costs incurred in producing the goods. Once the bridge is built, once the dam is built, there should have been sufficient spending power issued so that all the bills could have been paid. Because in the natural world, once the dam is built, once the bridge is built, the debt is paid. It's physically paid. In the real world, it's physically paid. And the financial system doesn't reflect that. And it hasn't reflected it. Let's put this in perspective. It hasn't reflected it for hundreds and hundreds of years. You've got to go back pre-industrial. You've got to go back because when we went industrial with steam power, electrical power, hydrocarbon energy, nuclear energy, automation, advanced control, robotics, as we have evolved, all of these mechanisms have produced more and more with less and less physical labour. Labour is not producing all wealth. It's actually our cultural inheritance. It's solar energy. It's the resources of the earth, not labour. Labour is becoming a smaller and smaller component. And so that 60%, Eve, I put it to you that there was a time, I think it was 150 years ago, 85% of the population was involved in agriculture. 150 years ago. Now it's less than 5%. What happened to that other 80% of the population? They're out there producing, if they're working, they're producing cars and ships and motorbikes and TVs and telephones and all the infrastructure, the roads, the buildings, the sewers, the telephone systems, all the things that go with it, all the things that we consider a part of modern industry. But the fact is that once something is produced, the debt is paid, the physical debt is paid. And that's what the national dividend is about. It's about reconciling debt and also placing power, wrestling it away from, if you like, the totalitarians in charge, wrestling it away and placing it in the hands of the individual. It is a decentralizing or devolving method in the financial system. And the financial system is the same system that's been operating for at least the last 400 years. Since the establishment of Central Bank of England, the same system has been operating, and it has not taken into account this enormous increment of association. The increment of association, or our cultural inheritance, steam energy. Look at what happened when they started putting steam into agriculture, and you had your combine harvesters now. And look what happened in the woolen mills when they started putting steam energy, and now of course you've got electrical energy, and the woolen mills with the robots and the machines, they just produce, and very little labour involvement. And you've got to take these things into account. The financial system is not responding. It's a narrative that has stayed the same for at least the last 400 years. Eve.
You can, I just saw the debt clock there. You can look at the debt. And Mr. C.H. Douglas met with the bankers many years ago, in 1923, I believe. And he explained to the bankers this could be something that you could still become wealthy in your, with your banking system and all that. Mm-hmm. But there has to be another form of income, which is the dividend. And they agreed with him. They agreed with Clifford Hugh Douglas.
Yeah.
He's a good idea, but you know what? We're not interested in giving anybody a dividend. They will die tooth and nail to defend this awful system that they have, the banking system. Mm-hmm. And it was born in inequity, and God will bring them down one day. Mm-hmm. So the thing is, social credit is the freedom of society. You have here an article that we put out many years ago in a form of a leaflet, mm-hmm. and it's social credit in the United States in 1932. So Clifford Hugh Douglas made a lot of advancement before Mr. Evan, our movement, was born. He passed the social credit law to be law in the Congress by a vote of 289 to 60.
Yeah.
But when they passed, they went to the Senate, who is made up of lawyers, bankers, judges, and so on and so forth. They turned it flat down. No, that's socialism. They knew what they were getting into because it had been talked about before. Mm-hmm. It was about a dividend, and they will fight tooth and nail not to mm-hmm. give us a dividend because they want to keep the people in debt. So what are they going to do with the debt. The debt is getting so big now, it's impossible. Well, we know that it's impossible to pay, and it's getting bigger every day as that clock winds around.
Mhm.
What are they going to do with us later? Are they going to say we're going to owe it now, and you're in trouble? We've got to take your business away. We've got to take your homes away, and we'll pay the debt with that. What are they going to do? What are they planning? They must
Mhm.
have some kind of a plan to keep
Mhm.
the debt going like this.
Mhm.
Don't you
Yeah,
think so?
yeah, I do. I do, Eve. I'm just going to cut across to the debt clock. You'll notice that it's still going up. It's not going down. And the same with this one. Both the debt clocks are continuing to go up. And the fact is the debt clock is a reflection of new loans. It's a reflection of new loans. If that people were not, if industry was not, if government was not taking out new loans, the economy would collapse in a heartbeat. And this debt, this irredeemable debt, is something that the national dividend reconciles. Now, industry, individual initiative, working people who are working and industry leaders, all the sorts of narratives that people go through in order to establish an income, they still are fully entitled to the rewards. And the national dividend doesn't touch it, doesn't take an ounce away from it. What it does do is it ensures that the cultural inheritance, which belongs to everyone, it's a cultural inheritance that is, if anything, this is the time that something should be equal to all. And it's the cultural inheritance that should be issued in the form of credit, not debt. And then that debt clock would be reconciled. That debt clock would stand at zero because the dividend would go up or would go down based on the productive capacity, what was actually being produced. And if everyone wanted to have a holiday, well, obviously the dividend would get less and less. And it's only what the machines were making. So it's a reflection of the productive capacity of the community, of the nation. And you can get more by working harder, and you can get less once you've got enough. And of course, another point that I want to just place in this forum is the environmental question. The environmental question, and that is that if industry produces something that actually is going to last a lifetime, say a car tyre, now the life cycle of a car tyre isn't very impressive. In actual fact, with all the exotic engineering that goes into all the different types of plastics and rubbers that are used to create a tyre, they could design a tyre to last a lot longer. But then their sales would drop, and then they wouldn't be reconciling the debt that the industry has. So what you've got to consider is that the environmental answer in a situation like that is to build tyres that last a long time. And then you don't need to produce as much. And then industry can wind back. And so the resources of the earth are reduced in their exploitation. All of these things are, to me, environmentally sustainable simply by looking at the financial system. But the philosophy is the key to it. To me, the philosophy is the key to it, and that is that we are created free. We have to consider that freedom is an inherent right. It's not derived from the state. Our freedom is derived from the fact that we are born and we live, and that life forces in us are given to us as a free gift, as a gift from God. And this freedom is essential. And it's on the basis of that freedom that the national dividend ensures that freedom. It's security. It's freedom and security. And so you've got to balance this whole thing. That's why I say the difference between what the Democrats are talking about in regard to the environment, there is some valid arguments there. What the Republicans are talking about in regard to individual initiative, free enterprise, there's also valid arguments there. But monopoly capitalism or totalitarianism, which advocating, they're both advocating either a national totalitarianism or an international totalitarianism, but totalitarianism is the opposite of freedom. And you've got to consider that both political parties may have some valid arguments, but you've got to reconcile it, and that's where the national dividend comes into its own. It reconciles the differences. It reconciles it. It takes into account both. Eve.
Yes, we're having the elections on well, it's about a month and 10 days or something like this from now,
Hmm.
and they started to put the signs all over the streets on on Tuesday.
Hmm.
Man, that's nice to see. You know, all the beautiful names and the beautiful intentions from the people.
Hmm.
Uh, I hate to tell you what I said to a politician. You didn't like it, so you just said, "I'm not talking to you anymore."
Hmm.
And it was about Trudeau, and I called Trudeau a communist,
Hmm.
and uh, and well, he got insulted with that, and I said he must have been with the Liberal Party because their Trudeau belonged to that party. But
Hmm.
it's all a question of education.
Yeah.
If you educate, is that like we talk about John F. Kennedy back in 1963?
Hmm.
He got killed, you know, and then they made stories out of it and everything else. What Kennedy should have done is educate the people. Maybe he tried. We don't know that. Maybe
Hmm.
he wanted to say certain speeches, you know, to educate the people as much as he could. But anyway, he didn't get the message across. People were ignorant of the whole thing. So they don't know that it was the financial system that actually had him murdered
That's right.
because he was because right there he put out a dividend in 1963 in April
Hmm.
1963
Hmm.
of almost $5 billion
That's
in
right.
his
Yeah.
own, is in his own money in this United States note, not Federal Reserve note, United States notes. And shortly later, they killed him. The people didn't know, and they pulled these bills out of circulation. I have a few, and I show people, but it just travels from one side to the other. People don't get it, but the education of people is very important. And I'm going to talk to some candidate and told them, "Are you planning to establish a dividend for the people
Hmm.
in your party? You could. Any parties could adopt social credit as law, but
Hmm.
right now let's concentrate on the national dividend.
Hmm.
Are you planning to establish a dividend in your party?" Well, what do you mean? I know I'm going to be asked, what are you talking about? You know.
Hmm.
So anyway, that's going to open up a conversation, and I'm sure some might say, well, you know, that'd be a good idea, but you know, taxpayers only have so much money.
Hmm.
It's awful. Like people are so brainwashed, and when I tell them that taxes don't go for services, what do you mean? I had my arm fixed the other day, and you know who paid for that? The doctor and everything else, and you have to a whole explanation. So
Hmm.
the education is a little bit tough, but we've got to do it one step at a time.
Yeah.
God will pick His time when it's time for people to know and to understand. Uh, that's why people tell me I'm crazy. You know, why you keep doing this? You're knocking on doors. You know, people don't listen to you. They won't do nothing. They're lazy. They're this, then that. They're too passive. I'm still gonna try. I
Hmm.
have to.
Yeah.
It's beyond my under my understanding as far as that's concerned. I have to keep trying. I have to keep fighting,
Hmm.
whichever way it is, and people should take it that way.
Hmm.
You know, there is hope. There is hope. There is a solution. So we have to make it known to the world. Whether we achieve it or not, I'm still going to fight.
Yeah. No, that's a very good attitude, Eve, and I congratulate you on it because to me the key in any situation is the initiative of the individual. We talked about industry and the initiative and how creative people can be, and they take it on their own back to bring about a new product, a new whatever, and how resourceful they can be. And the fact is that freedom is exactly the same. Freedom can only be exercised one individual at a time, and it's when there's a sufficiency of active individuals, then tyranny is resisted. And it starts with one and it works from there. And of course, you're not limited on how you find expression in your freedom or how you resist tyranny. You're not limited. In actual fact, the creative forces that are in you, the inspirations are. that are within you. There to me is the answer to freedom. Those inspirations, that initiative, you exercising your resistance to tyranny. I think it's most important. I will point out, if your election coming up is anything like ours that we had in Australia, there is no difference between the two parties. All the argument will ever be is that one party can manage the economy better than the other, that one party will tax more than the other. And so people choose between the two evils, but no change in direction, no change in policy, no question going to the people about handing power back to the people, about reducing the number of laws, about finding a way through the financial system to redeem debt so that debt can be actually retired, and and uh, and that sort of thing. Taxes can be eased. There's no question whatsoever of a change of policy. The two parties, the two major parties, are identical. If there's a third or there's a fourth on it, they're generally in the same boat. They won't talk about changing the policy, only that they will manage the existing policy better. And I think it is so sad, it is so frustrating that thinking people are being duped by what the media presents. And bear in mind, the biggest supporters of media are the financial systems, because without the backing of the financial systems, the media would collapse in a heartbeat. And so it never brings up, it never discusses, it never takes into account this irredeemable debt, and nor does it bring up nor take into account an honest change of policy by proposed candidates. They don't bring it up. It's not discussed. And so you've got a choice of two, which is the lesser of two evils, which is no choice at all. Eve.
That's that's why, like in our movement, we're going there at the end of this month, the 22nd of September, which is next week. It's going fast, but that's why we have houses that it's run like a congregation. So yeah, we have meetings every day. We have work to do. We have printing to do. We have articles to write and everything else. But every day, every one of those full-time pilgrims, okay, they will pray 2 to 3 hours a day, which I don't do that much. I only do maybe an hour or something like that, except when I go to church, it's a little longer. But throughout their work, all day long, they might be tired. They might be doing certain things that are going to take a lot of energy out of them. But there's one thing they never forget, is to pray every day to keep the strength to keep going, to get the strength to keep going. And we have in our logo, when we send a Michael journal, and on top it has one mission, and it says, "For the triumph of the Immaculate." So Jesus gave his mother. There you go. For the triumph of the Immaculate, Jesus gave his mother the power to crush the head of evil, the head of Satan. And she's the one that's going to triumph over this terrible system. So that's why we pray. Maybe a lot of people say, "Oh, you're praying too much." They get the prayers. I've heard that from certain places where, in churches even, "Oh, you pray too much. You pray a lot less. You do some work instead." So, but we don't fail. Mr. Event was very, very. He was consecrated to the Virgin Mary and to the movement, and that's why he lasted that long. I couldn't imagine a person discovering the writings of Social Credit and then taking it on as, "This is a light upon my path." And he formed the movement and had a big following. He always wanted to go to Africa, but never had the chance to. But now we're in Africa, bigger than ever. So the spiritual part of our movement is very important. Otherwise, we wouldn't keep going. A lot of social credit groups have these social creditor, but they have that piece missing where you really got to ask heaven's help to keep the fight going.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah, yeah. No, that's beautifully put, Eve. I have a different take on it, and we did discuss a little bit about that before this evening's recording. I see the word work and worship as having the same root, and that is work or worship is in actual fact when you do your work. If you're doing work like we're doing work, it's part of your worship. It's part of your prayer. You're actually out working um, the things that you believe. So yes, pursuing freedom. Render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, but unto God the things that are God's. The pursuit of freedom is about limiting the power of Caesar. That's what it's about. You can't worship God if Caesar is all dominating. And to me, it's most profound, and it's certainly very vivid and clear in my mind, that Caesar needs to be limited. And Caesar, in my view, reflected today, is not only in government, not only in the politicians, but also in the elites, in the financial system, those that dominate over us, the power behind government. And this, to me, is what it's about. It's about limiting that power. So I think it's very important. And the national dividend is the method whereby that power is wrestled from the money power and handed back to the individual, and they can exercise their freedom and in a responsible manner and realizing their cultural inheritance. Eve, I'd like to. It's 32 minutes. I'd just like to call for closing comments for this evening. It's been quite good.
we've got to ask our politicians who are going to they're going to offer their platforms in the next few weeks, and they're going to fight against each other, and they're going to find faults. Oh, you did this, you did that.
Hmm.
What madness. But we got to ask them for a dividend, not a guaranteed salary coming out of taxes from other people. I don't want other people's money. I
Hmm.
don't want people to to give me money because they're forced to. I want to earn my inheritance,
Hmm.
and this is through a dividend that we all should get from when we're born until we die.
That's right.
That is what God wants us to do.
Yeah. No, that's a beautifully put, Eve. What is physically possible must be made financially possible. We must be able to purchase what we produce. It's that simple. And that to me needs a change in policy. And my guess is you won't see any who are on a platform for this coming election in Canada will discuss anything like that because that would mean a change in policy. And they won't. They'll all arguing about who's going to administer the existing policy, the existing narrative. And the policy, of course, is the purpose of the financial system. What is the purpose of the financial system? It's to enslave the world. And your politicians are party to that. And that's something that you've really got to come to grips with. If you're going to vote, consider a responsible vote. Very, very clearly a responsible vote. And don't vote for the lesser of two evils. Thank you so much, Eve, for today. I've really enjoyed it at the Freedom Forum.
It's a pleasure.
No
Have a
worries.
good day.
No worries. Cheers, ladies and gentlemen.